the right time to stand up for freedom? Could it be when you start to feel creating children who'll inherit the pain and the debt of this nation and be slaves to the banks that cause hyperinflation, who are masters of commerce, lies, and bad legislation? Whoa, if you looked in the eyes of 1,000 young children through fences of razors, their innocence stolen as the red flag of tyranny flies in the open, is that when you finally notice? Whoa, whoa, but I'm only a stranger here. I'm a long, long way from my home, and they say I can't change all the things I find strange, for what can one man do alone?
Welcome back to the Liberty Test, the show where we take New York State government actions, run them through the principles of liberty to see what holds up and what falls apart. Today, I've got fellow New York libertarians, Rose Leatherman and Robert Schuon with me. We're looking at a policy proposal making the rounds here in New York State. Mandatory liability insurance for firearm owners. That's right. Under proposed legislation, Senate Bill S5974, and its companion, Assembly Bill A5611, every gun owner in the state would be required to purchase and maintain a liability insurance policy with at least $1 million in coverage. The policy would have to cover damages resulting from negligent acts involving a firearm. The idea, according to sponsors, is to make sure gun owners are financially accountable if their weapons cause harm, particularly in situations where negligence plays a role. Think of it like car insurance, they say. If you're responsible for a potentially dangerous tool, you should be insured against accidents. But unlike car insurance, this isn't about access to a shared road system. This is about exercising what we consider a fundamental right, the right to keep and bear arms. And this proposed insurance isn't optional. It would be a legal mandate. Fail to comply, and you could lose your firearms license and registration. The bills are still early in the legislative process. They've been referred to committee, but haven't yet advanced to a floor vote. Still, the conversation is heating up, and depending on how things move in Albany, this could become a serious issue in the coming months. So today, we're going to ask, is this kind of policy consistent with liberty, or is it one more layer of coercion dressed up as common sense? Let's run it through the liberty test. Who wants to start by steel-manning the state's case?
Well, I mean, okay, from their point of view, suppose someone has a gun. They are negligent with this gun. They don't keep it properly stored. Some kid finds it. They decide, ooh, hey, this would be fun to play with. They accidentally injure someone. And then the people, the owners, don't have the money to cover the cost of a lawsuit, don't have the money to cover the cost of this person's medical bills. So then who ends up on the hook? Probably that money is eventually going to have to come from somewhere. The cost is probably going to have to be eaten by the medical facilities that treat the person's injuries. Much of it's, if they try to sue the gun owners will likely just file for bankruptcy. Like eventually, the costs are going to be passed on to somebody else. So by requiring gun owners to carry insurance, it ensures that they actually will be able to cover the cost of a lawsuit if their gun is ever used either in a crime or in an accidental discharge, in an accidental injury. So it will encourage responsibility among gun owners because, one, it will limit gun ownership to somebody who has to have the money to buy the insurance policy up front. They'll have to meet the insurance company's criteria for being able to get the policy, and that will probably require things like maintaining proper gun storage. And it will ensure that it'll prevent other people from having to cover the cost of gun-related incidents.
So it sounds like a pretty simple core idea. If you own something that can cause serious harm, you should be financially responsible for the consequences. Do you agree, Robert?
Oh, you mean like the leaf blower, right? The leaf blower insurance and the grass cutting insurance and the lighting insurance and all the other
Well,
insurances
hold
that.
on. We expect businesses to carry liability insurance. Why should firearms, tools that can be deadly and in a single moment of negligence, be treated
Well,
differently?
first of all, I'm pretty sure that you can get riders on your insurance policies if you own firearms. That's one separate item. But the point of this has nothing to do with insurance per se. This has to do with the state being able to determine who owns a gun, and that's because by doing this, it's the old a chilling effect. Because again, the idea is to basically force gun owners to either pony up, and who's to say next year it won't be 2 million or 3 million or 10 million or
Well,
100
with
million.
inflation, it
Well,
might have to
inflation.
be.
Well, there you
But
go.
I mean, some of these proposals even suggest using revenue from insurance to
I mean,
fund gun safety programs or community outreach to stop violence. And if you think about it that way, the goal isn't to restrict gun rights, just to encourage accountability and reduce avoidable harm.
Well,
I
it's just
mean, do increasing insurance premiums for homeowners insurance policies for houses that have pools, does that have a chilling effect on pool ownership? No, it's
actually, yeah,
because
it
if you have
does.
a pool,
It does, yeah.
you're way more likely to have a fatal incident at your house.
Well, with a pool,
But I
yeah.
mean,
I
does
think
it really? Are
insurance
they
in the
trying to
free
outlaw
market tends
pools?
to be acquired by people who already have a thing and see some need for protection. Like I have pet insurance.
Right. Well, the biggest difference here is the state imposing it on
Mhm.
people who have no, like, again, it's a presumption of guilt in a way, because it's that you are assumed to be what's the word, unethical, incompetent, and that you will do something improper. Okay, now you can buy insurance for almost anything already in the market, and if you feel that way, you can go out and buy insurance. But the level of responsibility for most gun owners is way up there, for legal gun owners anyway. Are you gonna, is this gonna be, if you use a gun illegally, you're gonna also be charged with not having insurance for your illegal firearm? Is this
I'm
another,
sure they would throw that charge
Oh
at you,
yeah, they
yes.
charge you
you
for
know?
the illegal gun, and also in the same way that you can technically, if you're selling something illegal, you can pay taxes on it, so that if you get caught, you can't be charged with tax evasion. Still, I'm sure, yeah, if you have a gun illegally, you could still pay for the gun insurance, and then at least they couldn't get you on that.
And
Well,
the
what about the insurance
illegal
that does
ammo.
exist that actually protects gun owners in case they have to use their weapon defensively? I've seen various ads for those services.
Yeah, and that's basically people that decide that they want to have insurance because they don't want to lose their house or get sued if there's an incident, and for some reason that they're found partially or fully at fault. But the state imposing it like they do with car insurance, which again, this also is, people just take it for granted that the state has the authority to impose this on people, even for car insurance. Okay, but amazingly, there are states in this country that actually don't require you to have car insurance. Funny enough, so why?
What? I thought driving was a privilege, just like gun ownership.
Yeah, it's a
It's a
privilege.
privilege.
This is again the argument that every state, every authority makes when they want to restrict something. They make the same arguments over and over and over again. And this is how they restrict it, because it's the camel's nose under the tent. Okay, well, you got to have insurance. Oh, well, you got to register your ammunition, because remember, don't forget that bill is also up for a vote. Is that they want you to register all your ammo, which is by de facto registering the firearms that you have. Because if you have to register your ammo, they're going to know what caliber, they're going to know, how many rounds you have. So they're going to basically determine it. And, you know, when it comes down to the bottom line, firearms are not only used for defending yourself from intruders and other bad people. They are also, in the end, there to protect you from the state if the state tries to come after you, becomes tyrannical and comes after you.
Well, I can see why they would want to limit arms possession in
They
that
want
case.
no one to have arms.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
except
we're
the
talking
state.
about a situation where we're at odds with the state. I thought we were the state. I think it's important to examine like how insurance would work in a free market, because in a free market, people most likely would want insurance for all sorts of things. You'd probably want things like unemployment insurance. You'd probably want medical insurance, for at least for catastrophic coverage if you get into a car accident or get diagnosed with cancer. And you'd probably want homeowners insurance in case your house burns down and you need to repair it or buy a new one. And you'd probably want liability insurance on a bunch of things that you could realistically be sued for. Like if you own guns and there is any kind of chance that someone could get into your gun storage or you ever have to use them defensively, you probably would want to have them. People probably would want to cover some kind of like general insurance, just to protect against a variety of things, like for example, Konkin wrote about this. People would probably just carry general insurance for, if you get into a dispute with someone, you go to your personal insurance agent and you say, hey, I was wrongly fired from my job. What are my rights here? Or my neighbor is infringing on my right to enjoy my property. What are my rights here? It probably would cover things like firearms and other things that are potentially risky.
So if this is a good idea and we would want to get it anyway in a free market, are we just upset about this because we don't want to be told what to do by the state? Are we just whiny little babies?
No,
Well,
see, here's the problem, is that the state then can remove your right to own firearms by using this as a club. And again, it also allows the state to basically determine who can have a firearm. So if you're less fortunate in your finances, then you maybe can't afford insurance. So now they're basically determining by money who's allowed to defend themselves. And this is one of the big arguments. And again, one of our members used to be very clear on the fact that the original gun laws that they tried to ban guns were to keep minorities from owning guns. And this
aren't there some people who shouldn't own guns? I'm not saying the minorities shouldn't, but like, aren't there some people who shouldn't own guns? How could we control that in a completely free market libertarian society?
Guess what? They went after the Black Panthers.
Would be higher. Like, for example, if you have little kids in the house, rates would probably be higher. If you have a history of accidents in general that demonstrate that you might not be a particularly careful person, rates would probably be higher. But I mean, yeah, this could be a problem because it could easily lead to discrimination. For example, you are diagnosed with a mental illness, and statistically, someone like you is more likely to commit a crime, so your rates are higher. You're from a race that statistically, supposedly commits more crimes. You could be discriminated against because of something that you can't control and you did not choose.
Well, let me touch on that health aspect. Okay. Do you know that it is required for the health provider, when you go into the doctor's office now, they're required to ask you, are you feeling okay? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling depressed? This is a required question now. And this is the state's entry into things like red flag laws. Because if you ever feel like you have to answer those questions positively, what's the next thing that's going to happen? Is the state's going to show up at your door and say, well, you can't own firearms. You said you were depressed. And it doesn't matter. Like, you could have a family member die and you could be unhappy and sad. You could have lost your job. You could have done a million things that went wrong in your life, and you're feeling possibly not clinically depressed. Possibly you were. But whether or not that affects your ability to own firearms, New York State has a very clear policy on that. Danger to yourself and others. Now, if they can't prove that, okay, then they should not be taking away your rights. And this
Hold
is
on.
Well,
Hold
I
on.
mean, we did a
And-
whole stream on this.
Yeah.
They're trying to remove the danger to yourself or others standard to make it easier to revoke the rights of supposedly
people, that's
mentally
right.
ill people.
Yeah,
So,
and in that
why don't they just
conversation,
require
we
that?
talked about how the state exists, if it should exist at all, for only one reason, which is to protect rights. So do we have to wait for somebody to actually want to go out and hurt people or be so negligent that people get hurt and then there can be consequences? Because I feel like there's enough irresponsible people in New York State that that's not really going to stop people from being
Well, what's going to happen
bad
is, again, it's a
or
chilling
stupid.
effect. Would you go into the doctor? Let's say you're a legal firearms owner, you're responsible, all right, but you're having a tough time lately, and they're going to ask you that question. What do you say? Because if you say yes, now you have put your firearms ownership at risk, possibly permanently, because what the state wants is that if you were ever diagnosed with any form of mental illness, you should never be allowed to own firearms. This is like, it's beyond the pale, and it's insane as well, because it's like people have tough times in their lives and in their job, in their family, and to use that, it's one thing if you are clinically depressed to the point where you're suicidal, or you have schizophrenia where you could do something harmful to others, but that's why the psychiatric profession makes those evaluations. I'm sorry, I have a little bit of a cold today, but
Maybe you shouldn't own any firearms.
yeah, that's it. Well,
Don't you know if you have a
where's
cold,
the standard?
cloud your judgment because you're not firing on all cylinders, and you might not use your gun properly.
Well, this is it.
You're
This is
tired
where
and you don't put it away properly.
they
You
start
leave it
all
lying
these
out
things.
because
And
you're too tired to properly lock it in the gun safe, which is downstairs.
this is all part of New York State basically trying on all fronts to restrict and remove guns from legal gun owners' hands.
Wouldn't we all be safer if there weren't any guns?
Oh, please. Oh, really? Chicago. Let's talk about Chicago for just a minute. Okay, highest murder rate in the nation. Strictest gun laws in the nation. How about LA? Highest gun laws in the nation. And highest crime rates in the nation. They all go together. When you take away people's abilities to defend themselves, guess what? Crime goes up. And then you have other things like, not putting people in jail for things that are clearly crimes. And then what happens? Well, crime runs rampant. It's literally, you can literally take the last 4 or 5 years and point out and say, yep, here's a direct correlation one to the other. And it doesn't work anyway.
I agree with you, but here's the thing. There's a lot of people that are going to say the gun laws follow the crime, not the other way around.
And when they try and do that, they restrict gun laws. Like literally, people in San Francisco leave their windows open and put signs up that, please, my car's already been robbed, just leave it alone. Like, think about how insane
you're supposed to leave
is.
it unlocked with the windows down so people can go through it and
rifle your car. All right.
Yeah.
Look around. Go to a. I don't know if by you guys, but around here, they have toothpaste locked up behind plastic covers. Think about that. Toothpaste. I mean, is that how people want to live their lives? Is this how we're going to?
Wait a minute, Bob. Are you saying that someone should be
next?
shot? Someone should be shot for trying to shoplift toothpaste?
No, they should be arrested. But at the same point, see, again, when you break the law, see, now you bring that context into play. Because if you weren't breaking the law, you shouldn't get shot. However, if you're breaking the law, now you've escalated the situation to something where the store owner has rights as well. And the employees in that store have rights. And if you're taking away their products, their jobs, because you're damaging the store. Look at what happened in San Francisco. You've taken away these stores because they can't afford to operate when people are just walking out with thousands of dollars worth of stuff.
Or
And-
like, look at the case of people who are just walking around in the city and they get mugged.
Yeah.
How much more likely do you think a mugger would be to target someone if there's a high likelihood that that person is carrying a gun?
How about we look at the mugging rates in Texas?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that would be relevant. Or Florida.
Or the rates of violent crime in quote unquote gun-free zones versus
Exactly.
even in states where people otherwise can usually carry.
And that's it.
But another thing though that we touched on, like, okay, why does the Second Amendment exist in the first place? It's originally it was supposed to restrict the ability of the government to be able to outgun
Take
their
away your
citizens.
rights.
It was supposed to be a check on the expansion of government. So, of course, once the state has become deeply entrenched, there are people whose jobs rely on the continued existence of government. Like, of course, they're going to want to remove any possibility of the citizens serving as a check on government.
Well, that's
So
been the
they
plan,
would have they would naturally want to implement any additional barriers to people being able to own firearms.
Yeah, if you look at the state of things in Europe, especially in places like the UK, where they're arresting grandmothers for, sharing Facebook memes that they don't like,
Wow,
that goes
that
hand
stuff
in
is
hand with
crazy.
the elimination of the right to keep and bear arms.
Yeah, I mean, self-defense is effectively illegal. You have to show ID to buy a butter knife in the UK.
They're talking about blunting the knives and even having a knife registration. So that way people can't do knife
in the same
attacks.
way we have these anti-gun campaigns, like where politicians will go on about how, guns kill so many people per year. They have these anti-knife campaigns where some politician will get on stage and cry about how many lives were taken by knives in the past year. They'll go on about how some kid was killed by a knife, and if only we'd had better regulation on knives.
Let me ask you guys this. Do you think Australia would have been so draconian during the events of 2020 if they hadn't gotten all the guns away from their...
If they would have
they
had the
had
Second
guns.
Amendment, it would have been completely different. Okay.
They had a lot of guns, and then they went through a whole gun buyback, and they went through a whole process where they got a lot of guns out of the hands of private owners.
Yep.
People
and
just
within a few years,
and then they got locked down to
very hard.
And guess what it did? Absolutely nothing. It gave the state a lot more power. But
that was the point. Yeah, and they want to be able to do climate lockdowns and other things like that. Would be awfully hard if people could actually resist by force.
Yeah. Well,
let's look at how these insurance companies are going to work. Like, how many of them will there actually be? I mean, if you look at the precedent that has already been set with other industries where the state mandates insurance, there's usually only just a few insurance companies, because usually the ones that exist have deals with the state. May or may not be because a couple politicians happen to own stock in this particular company. Normally, they're given a state-sanctioned monopoly or semi-monopoly, and then people can't actually shop around. They have maybe 2 or 3 options. But then these are technically private companies, so they technically can choose who they're going to do business with and discontinue coverage at any time. But, they're private companies. If they don't like what you're posting on Facebook, they don't like your political views, okay, technically they can just end their association with you and refuse to sell you insurance.
Try and find, let's say, certain types of doctors like urologists and other doctors like that without going to a single company. It's like, I know by down here, it is really crazy that you call and you start asking around. I need this particular doctor. Well, he works for it's this like organization. And you go, well, I don't want to deal with them. I've had problems with them. Well, sorry, that's all there is. And dealing with this kind of stuff. And this is, again, how it's manipulated. The system is manipulated to do this. And so is the insurance. Okay? In New York, car insurance is restricted. There are very few companies that actually do car insurance in New York because the restrictions, the rules are so out of hand. You know,
Is this how the state gets around case law, like Murdoch versus Pennsylvania? I think that was a 1943 case where they decided that the government may not impose a license tax on the exercise of a First Amendment right, such as distributing religious literature. But the key quote that I'm remembering here is a state may not impose a charge for the enjoyment of a right granted by the federal Constitution.
right.
But if an insurance company is required, that's a private business.
Well, see, but that's deliberate. That's deliberate, maneuvering around the law. It's their way of backdooring all of this so that they can get the same restrictions. And like, what'll happen is they'll just keep raising the requirements and the things. Well, if you want to get the insurance, now you got to register all your firearms. And see, again, it gets around the registry issues too, because it's illegal for the federal government to require a registry. Well, this gets around that. Why? Because if you have to insure your guns, they have to be registered. And then the state will say, well, we need a reporting form because we have to see all of these. And this is how tyranny basically creeps in a little at a time. And
This is
believe
actually
me,
brilliant.
this is deliberate. It is quite deliberate. And that's done all the time. It's the same like the ammo registration, the ammunition, because again, can't fire a gun if you don't have the ammunition. And yeah, there are a few people that load their own ammunition, and they'll just restrict the powder, the lead. They've already done. They're working on the lead big time. You know, they use the ecological impact. Well, lead is bad for the environment, so you can't make bullets out of lead. You know, and it's like, so they basically restrict it all. And
That's convenient, but nothing about lithium, which is required to make those batteries for the cars that they want us to own.
much
by
more highly
2030.
toxic.
That they can burn down the
They're
Tesla
very
station.
selective in which types of environmental damage they seem to care about. Like they care about Bitcoin heating up the water, but
You don't hear about that much anymore. You know, it's funny
that didn't really catch on.
they try. They keep trying different things, and that's actually the thought that I had earlier before Robert painted his more bleak picture of the state and their plan. I was thinking, you know, every so often the state comes up with a new way that they know is going to be found unconstitutional to slow down gun ownership or to discourage gun ownership. You know, they make it confusing. They create multiple
They
steps.
just outright ignore the law. They ignore the
Sure they do.
Constitution because look at New York City. New York
But
City
my point
was told
is they
you
know.
can't do it.
They know that that's going to happen. They do it anyway because as soon as it gets shot down in court after a few years and lots of money gets spent,
Right.
they'll just do something else. And they keep doing it
Or
in a
the same
conveyor
thing.
belt that never ends. But what you're saying is actually even more nefarious. This insurance thing is a complete end run around a whole bunch of
Well, it's an
regulations.
attempt and run around the Constitution. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's designed that way on purpose. But again, it doesn't stop them because New York City, when they were told by the Supreme Court, no, that's unconstitutional. Oh no, we withdrew the law. It's gone. So then 2 weeks later, they reimposed the law. Literally 2 weeks. So it's like, you know, again, no. The problem is that the court has no way of enforcing its decisions. The court is basically getting more and more timid all the time. You look at the current decisions. Oh, well, that's the Congress's problem, but the Congress is too timid because they don't want to do it. You know, they don't want to endanger their seats. There's only a few people that actually talk about it. You know, that are actually bold enough to step up and say this isn't right. You know.
Okay. So I guess we've beaten up the state enough at this point, although we can never really beat up the
Not even
state
close.
enough. Yeah. But I want to
It's
get
our
back to
job.
something we started to talk about earlier and then got off beating the state, which is in a completely free market, in a libertarian society, we know that some individuals would choose to get insurance, and that those individuals who choose to get insurance would probably be incentivized to be more responsible with their firearms in order to get the best rates or to be covered at all. But that still doesn't exclude a lot of people who, for various reasons, wouldn't be covered at all. So what would the negative consequences be of this libertarian system? We sort of glossed over it before,
Well,
but let's be real clear. We're not utopians. There would be a consequence. So is this consequence better or worse than the negative consequences we've already been talking about with the state in charge?
it would be like driving without car insurance. Like, okay, you can choose to live dangerously and play the odds. However, if you get into a car accident, you are then on the hook for the full cost of the repairs to the other person's car if you're found to be at fault.
Then you just declare bankruptcy, like you said before.
No. See, that's not the way it is. See, this is the problem with the state taking over so many of these functions, because this is part of the whole state thing, is that they allow you to declare bankruptcy for certain things, but if it's like you owe the state something, then all of a sudden that's not dischargeable through bankruptcy. This is the problem with having the state be the nanny for everyone, is that responsibility kind of goes out the window. Okay. Now,
all right. Enough about the state. What would happen in a libertarian society if someone decides to not have insurance?
My favorite quote. Wait, my favorite quote was one of my favorite authors is Robert Heinlein, who said in his novel, he said, "Hey, you can hedge anything for a price, and what you do is you go to a bookie, because that's exactly the job." What do you think insurance companies are? They're bookies. Okay, look, they're legal bookies, absolutely. And do they perform a good function? Yeah, they do. But they're bookies. They're betting that you're not going to do or have the problem that you're paying them to insure you against. If you're buying fire insurance for your house, okay, they're betting that you won't have a fire. Okay, and they have the numbers to back it up. They have statistics. That's their job. It's the same thing with firearms ownership. They sit down and say, okay, there's X number of incidents with firearms that are the owner's fault, that negligence or whatever, and it's going to cost us this much on average over so many million people to insure for that, and we'll still make our whatever profit. I don't want to even go into that aspect of it, because that was back in our second or third episode when we talked about the insurance companies, but they will come up with a number. Okay, the problem is when the state gets into it, now that number has no basis in reality. It's a number that's dictated by the state, because their goal is not to cover you in case of loss or damage or having a problem or making a mistake, whatever. It's to get rid of the thing that they want to get rid of.
Sounds like you're saying it would be more affordable to have insurance in an actual free market, so there would be fewer people choosing to be uninsured.
There would be a competitive market. There would not be these monopolies. So
I'll bet money there already was.
Across state lines if they wanted to. They could buy the people could pick and choose. Like, they could have it cover lots of different scenarios, or they could just have catastrophic coverage at much lower rates.
I would bet if you went back in history 50 or 60 years, your homeowner's policy covered this already, but it was removed. And it was removed, I would wager, with the gentle nudging of the government.
Well, let me ask our audience then, if you guys know what insurance covered 50 years ago or more, drop it in the comments, because that sounds like an interesting point.
Now,
but you guys are squirming out of my question, which is still on the table. What are we accepting as consequences of the libertarian system when some individuals inevitably choose to be less responsible and they don't carry insurance?
People may escape liability. They may escape accountability from if someone steals a person's gun, uses it to rob someone. The victims may not be able to get recourse if the people whose gun was stolen are unable to pay, and if the robber is not found, or perhaps the gun owners themselves are irresponsible with their gun and someone is accidentally shot. Like, they may not be able to pay. So there is going to be that small number of people who
that's
are
tiny.
Harmed.
That's a tiny fraction.
I don't want to hand wave it away. The answer I'm really looking for is this is the role for a judicial system.
Well,
whether it's a private judicial system
you
like
have
we've talked about
financial
in the past.
liability, okay?
Mhm.
And how about this? How about if you are irresponsible, okay, and someone gets hurt because of your actions, not only are you financially liable, but you're also criminally liable. Because again, okay, let's go to that scenario. You did not secure your gun properly. Somebody comes in, steals your gun, uses it to shoot somebody else. Is there liability there? There may well be. Because
Right,
again,
because
if they can show that you were negligent in securing your firearm, okay, that's on you. And that's, again, this is, like you said, this is where the judicial system comes in and helps sort out the mess, if you will, because it's always
Mhm.
a mess in that kind of situation. And then you can figure out, okay, where does the liability lie? Who's responsible? How
Mhm.
much are they responsible? Again, if you do something stupid with a firearm that's clearly, uh, negligent or just bad, you don't know what you're doing, that is your
Yes.
responsibility.
And there are centuries of case law in English common law, which is our tradition.
Yeah.
There is centuries of case law on exactly these sorts of issues.
and as I kind of was touching on earlier, in a stateless society where people choose to have their own general insurance agent, like this is where you go to your insurance agent and you say, "Hey, I was a family member of mine, or I myself was injured by this person who was irresponsible with their gun. Okay, how do I move forward?" And then this person would help you navigate um, the system. They would say, "Okay, this person has such and such insurance, so they agreed to use this." Arbitration firm, so that's where we're going to go for damages, and they'll decide like how much you are owed in terms of damages to cover your medical bills.
And then, just like with car insurance, if an uninsured driver causes damage to your car or your property, there are mechanisms for that. You're not left out in the weeds, but if you don't have insurance yourself, then you are, and that's the incentive right there to go out and get it,
That,
right?
and also whoever owns the roads probably would say, as part of our agreement for driving on these roads, you have to have insurance.
And that begs the question of what rules individual communities would choose to have
Right.
for
Like if you want to use our
firearms. And
community roads, you either agree to pay damages or you have insurance. And same with firearms. Like they may say, okay, if you want to be part of our community, you are required to have firearms insurance, or you are required to pay damages associated with firearms if your gun ever is used in a crime or accidentally hurts someone. So therefore, we recommend having insurance because otherwise you'll be paying out of pocket.
Right.
yeah.
I mean,
So these would be
there's another aspect to this as well, okay? Because I want to bring up our platform for a minute, okay? We're going to go to Section 3, which is our very famous defensive rights. So that individual rights I'm paraphrasing, may be defended. And then when you get to 3.1, individuals have the right to use reasonable and necessary force, including the use of weapons, to protect themselves, others, and property, and therefore have the right to keep and bear arms, which is basically just rephrasing what our actual Constitution, federal Constitution says, that you can protect yourself, because the basic right here is to defend yourself. And the state, the New York especially, let's stick with New York here, loves to pretend that that's not the real use for firearms. That's not the most basic reason to have a firearm, is to protect your rights, protect you against an intruder, protect you against anyone who's going to try to take your rights away. And without some means of defending yourself, whatever it might be, sometimes an armored bulldozer, okay, the what happens is you just become a victim. And the state loves victims. That's why they do what they do. They want to make more victims, because if everyone's a victim, you're dependent on the state. And especially New York, they that's what they want, is one giant, they want to be mommy and daddy to everyone in the state, that you're too stupid, you're too incompetent to take
Without
care of
us,
yourself.
how would you have shoes? Okay, there's not enough of a market for people with your particular foot deformity. No one's gonna make shoes if we don't mandate it.
Yep.
You can begin to see why they don't care about these sorts of social problems that we care about so much, like the toothpaste. If all the stores stop selling toothpaste because it keeps getting stolen, then the state will come up with a way of providing toothpaste, and it'll suck and it'll be rare, but
Well,
they're
maybe
the
it'll
only
even be
ones
poisonous,
providing
right?
it.
Because again, what if you're like me, okay, and you don't use the fluoride toothpaste? You want
Yeah,
to
me
use a
neither.
toothpaste that doesn't destroy my teeth and my
Yeah,
enamel,
shout out for Boca toothpaste.
right? It's like I love it. It's great stuff, and it's like I want the right to choose. I love that. What was that? It was that movie Demolition Man. That was hilarious. Okay, where he says, I want to be able to do the things I want to do because it's my right to do that. You know, if it might be stupid and it might even be contrary to my health, but I'm a human being and I get to decide what I want to do as long as I don't hurt somebody else or mess with their stuff. And it's a great philosophy for life if you apply it universally, and you have to apply it universally. You can't just apply it to the things that you like and not the things you don't like. And this is one of the problems we have today. This is where everybody wants to apply everything piecemeal so that they can have their cake and eat it too. It's like, no, that's not how this works. If you're going to own a firearm, you need to be responsible and you need to handle it responsibly. Okay, it's not even whether or not it is a legal requirement. It is a personal responsibility requirement. This is where people get libertarians like so wrong. You know, oh, you guys are in favor with the drugs. No, we're not in favor of it. We're saying that you have the right to do with your body what you please. But if you destroy your liver or ruin your organs because you're using some illegal drug, that's on you. It's your responsibility.
I think a lot of liberals side with us on the issue of responsibility when you're hurting others.
Right.
Where they disagree with us is on the social responsibility to protect people from themselves. And I think if we steelman them, they're coming from an understandable place where they're like, look, you're not always at your best. You're not always doing the things that you would be doing if you were in your right mind.
Right.
So,
people would not choose to take care of one another if it was not imposed on them. I mean,
that's nonsense. You know, like
before the welfare state, mutual aid societies were extremely common, and most people belonged to them because it was dangerous to not belong to one of them, and people had tighter communities where they would help each other out more. Okay, the welfare state has allowed people to stop having to be connected to each other and to stop helping each other, because now, you can see that person who is struggling in your community can be like, well, okay, why don't they just apply for unemployment? Why don't they just apply for food stamps? It takes the pressure off members of the community to help one another.
I mean, the personal responsibility and the authority over your own body go hand in hand with one another. They cannot be separated. When the state takes away the responsibility, they also take away your authority. And at some point, you just become basically a controlled servant of the state.
I think a lot of people are okay with that. Their ideal world is living with mommy and daddy, or maybe being an elementary school student and just doing that for life.
The thing with that is it doesn't last. It can't last. Because again, if there aren't enough people in society taking responsibility and taking care of these issues, okay, the society collapses. I mean,
you just have the experts. The experts will take care of everybody.
Right? These same experts that said that, I don't want to get us some more rock.
We don't have to go there, but
on social media.
I think we all agree that expertise can be co-opted by people with nefarious ends. And even when the experts are well-intentioned, they get stuff wrong. And besides, they're always going to do what's in their own best interests.
Give
you know,
give enough
even if
money,
they
and
justify it
you'll
as being
find
in
an
yours.
expert on your side for anything you want. So if there's enough
Yeah,
money,
well, then we just need to eliminate capitalism entirely. So that way there's, no one who can pay the experts. Anyway,
Yeah.
I think we've actually beaten this one pretty much near to death. I don't see how the state could really justify this as anything other than a naked power grab to disarm people as
Well,
best
again,
they
it's
can, making
And
an
these are
end
the
run around the
children.
barring
Constitution.
that, they can at least generate a nice profit for companies that they just so happen to own stock in. Totally unrelated to why they're recommending this particular company as one of the two that will have that will be a state-sanctioned gun insurance agency.
Which, by the way, there you go. Is that tells you all you need to know, because if the state is sanctioning these companies, they're not independent anymore. They're now state controlled. This is where people do not understand the actual meaning of fascism, where it comes from and why. It's state control of private industry. Yeah, you could do business as long as you do it the way we want you to. It's literally like how the mob operates. It's like, well, if you do what we tell you, then everything will be fine,
Right. There are nominally private companies under fascism, but they're still very much beholden to the state.
Right.
You have to do exactly what the state tells you, or you could have your business seized.
And how is the state choosing these companies that is allowing, like, why aren't the major insurance companies just being like, yeah, sure, you want to offer gun liability policies, go for it. Actually, there are companies, and I guarantee you there are companies out there already. I know what the NRA is involved in some of them, but the that want to offer liability insurance to gun owners, and I will bet you money that the state will not allow them to sell policies in New York, because you can't control the market unless you control the market.
Yeah. Well, this all comes back to issues outside the scope of today's conversation. Fix the money, fix the world. That's what I think. But do you guys have any final thoughts on this?
If the courts won't support the Second Amendment in this manner, again, the ammunition issue, the gun issue, the gun insurance issue, then what's going to happen is the state will have de facto control over all firearms. They will simply set the prices so high and make it so difficult and force gun owners to report to the state every single thing about their firearms, where they are, how often they're used, all of that, and it will basically be an end run around the Second Amendment.
I worry that in a state night like New York, there would be a lot of people, maybe even a majority, cheering for that.
Yep.
Right. I mean, self-defense is a universal human right, and firearms are one of the most reliable means of self-defense. So therefore, any new law or regulation that limits a person's ability or limits a person's access to firearms, therefore restricts their right to self-defense and needs to be treated as such. It needs to be viewed as an attack on the right to self-defense, and people need to respond accordingly.
Do you know the most important person that needs to have firearms is females? Because when you're up against a 6'5", 250-pound guy, there is no female on the planet that is going to keep up with them unless they have a firearm. And if they do, then it's equal.
Probably beyond the scope of this discussion, but yeah, I have said to people, like, you can't truly claim to believe in women's rights if you're anti-gun, because the gun is an ultimate equalizer. It's the one thing that evens the playing field and allows women the right to defend themselves.
The police are not going to get to you in time. They're going to get to you to do the paperwork.
Yeah, they'll write a report, and maybe somewhere down the line, maybe someone will be held responsible and go to prison.
Yeah, maybe.
If someone gets around to examining the evidence.
Yeah, after you're scarred for life, assuming you survive the experience.
This is, the people forget that firearms help bring everyone to the same level in society, no matter what your origin, your ethnic background, your religion, your physical body type, okay, your sex, all of that. If you are trained to properly use firearms, you can defend yourself no matter who might be after you. And there's so many examples in videos and stuff that come out, and of course the mass media, the legacy corporate media buries as many of them as they can, but they're still all over the internet. They're on the alternative media like us, and showing that people who would not normally be able to defend themselves against a physical attack can then stop that physical attack and drive off an attacker. And that's one of the main reasons you need to have a Second Amendment and firearms to be legal for everyone to own. Everyone who is, again, we've discussed the age, as long as they are mentally responsible enough to do so, okay, then why are you restricting them from being able to defend themselves? And that's the question that we should be asking, and a lot of the news outlets should be asking. Why
I think the key
are you trying
word
to restrict self-defense?
The key word there, though, is responsible. I mean, because if you think about everything we've discussed and where that leaves us, it's with a policy that may sound reasonable on the surface, because after all, who doesn't want gun owners to be responsible? I mean, that's what you just said, right? But the policy, when you strip away the gloss, rests on a dangerous idea that you must pay for permission to exercise your rights, not because you harmed anyone, but because the state says you might. Right. That the mere potential for harm justifies coercive control.
Was it the Minority Report movie? It talks about exactly
future
that. Where,
pre-crime.
In the future. Well, we have determined that maybe 10 years from now, you might do this. So we're going to take action now to prevent you from doing that. And
that would be a great additional conversation about
insanity of that idea. It's
about the AI surveillance and potential for the whole pre-crime systems.
Yep. Oh, they're working for that because they've already set the precedent that peaceful people who've committed no crime, harmed no one, can be penalized simply for existing outside of bureaucratic norms.
Right. The potential that they might do something, and therefore, state needs to take preemptive action for
Let's be clear. Let's put this to bed. This isn't about reducing gun violence. It's about inserting government as a middleman into yet another corner of your life and calling it accountability. But liberty doesn't need permission slips. It doesn't come with premiums or deductibles or cancellation clauses, so no matter how they wrap it up or put a bow on it, it's still state coercion. So when the state demands insurance before it will recognize your right to self-defense, it's not regulating harm. It's stealing a right and outsourcing the sale of it to a private cartel propped up by government force. So New York's proposed mandate isn't a policy for safety. It's a policy for control. It's a velvet glove around an iron fist where rights become privileges and privileges can be revoked. So if we're ready, I think we have our liberty test verdict. If you believe rights are inherent, not granted, if you believe in personal responsibility without state coercion, if you believe that freedom means living your life without asking for permission, then you already know this policy fails the test. Loudly, clearly, completely. So with that, thanks for listening. And as always, don't wait for permission. Live free. Test everything.
Where will you be when the order is given to censor your mind as free speech is forbidden, as martyrs for peace from the world will be driven away by the sound of a bellowing thunder and choke on the blood of a dream going under, as arrogant men tear up our Constitution, and from every direction we cry revolution, standing together and without permission, soldiers for truth in the war of attrition, the love of our country as our ammunition. strange.